We will begin any minute from now. Let's just wait for the webinar. A pleasant day to each and everyone streaming on today's.
All right, it seems that Ms. Ibanez has a technical problem. Again, a pleasant day to each and everyone streaming on today's exhibition debate. This is Alisa Marie Ibanez and Marie Josephine Corsino, and we are your mistresses of ceremonies this afternoon. All right, I hope you all had a blissful morning and already had your lunch today, no? Before you joined in our Google Meet link. I cannot, by the way, we have finally reached the finals of our debate contest. And last week's preliminary debate was indeed exemplary. The debaters' arguments were fascinating to say the least, I must say. And not to mention, it was a first time for some, if not for most of them. That certainly is admirable. And we are honored and privileged enough to be witnessing another set of arguments this afternoon. Arguments that we may use in our future endeavors. It's just a bummer that we can't watch this activity in person, right, guys? But we are still grateful that we are able to hold this activity even we are just in the comforts of our homes. All right, on behalf of the committee, we are delighted and honored to welcome you all to today's activity, exhibition debate between House Yamato and House Hapsburg. The afternoon's debate proposition is resolved that Philippines-United States of America Mutual Defense Treaty be abrogated. Ladies and gentlemen, sharing experiences and learning from each other is a key building block in developing sound policy and regulatory frameworks tailored to address the needs of the future society. Through this afternoon's debate, we will see the power of deploying rational, reasoned arguments and compelling evidence in action. On that note, buckle your seatbelts and listen attentively to our debaters' arguments. To formally start the program, let's begin with the invocation and to be followed by the singing of the Philippine National Anthem.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Lord, thank you for this day, for the presence of everyone in this call. For once again, we are gathered and given the opportunity to appreciate life and your words. Forgive us for our shortcomings and cleanse our hearts as we learn and live your words and example. Father, bless our endeavors, especially today's meeting. May you guide us in our discussions, and may you enlighten our minds in every decision that we make. Give us your grace that we may effectively do our parts for your greater glory. All this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Glory.
Mga
Amen.
kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Hayang mag-ibig,
Now, may we have Miss Kimberly Masdo to give us her welcome address. A round of applause, please.
Thank you, Miss Marie Crisino. Good afternoon to all of you, especially to our distinguished guests, to our political science chairperson, Mr. Romel Himarangan. Good afternoon, sir. And to our participants and our dear viewers, I welcome you all to today's main event, the final debate competition. Today, our participants who are also part of the political science community will showcase their talents as good debaters. So, what makes them good debaters? Well, these debaters are ready with their valid arguments, backed by credible sources and research materials for this event. And this competition is made to make the students engage in a healthy exchange of different ideas and to strengthen the bond of the political science community. This community introduces a smart way of encouraging our talented debaters in sharpening their pens and minds to present a rational argument for their beliefs on a certain topic. In this way, this society is molding great debaters and rational thinkers for this generation. As Kevin Sturt said, the best ideas in the world will accomplish nothing if you leave them on paper. Talk about them. Debate, discuss, argue, and put them into action. Then you can change the world. Again, good afternoon, and I hope you will enjoy and learn something while we listen to the arguments with our debaters. So brace yourselves and enjoy the competition. That's all, thank you. Arguments with our debater.
Thank you, Ms. Do, for your words of wisdom. Let us introduce to you the debaters. As we call your name, please do wave at the camera so that the audience will be able to distinguish you and see your beautiful faces.
Representing the affirmative side is House Hapsburg.
Necessity.
The first speaker in charge of the necessity is Miss Maureen Alvis.
Stay.
The second speaker in charge of the beneficiality is Miss Jessa Aviso. The third speaker in charge of the practicability is Miss Maria May Dignos. And last but not the least, the rebuttalist of the affirmative side is Miss Mary Carmel Sinining.
Representing the negative side is House Yamato. The first speaker in charge of the necessity is Mr. Prince Rameses Badana. The second speaker in charge of the beneficiality is Mr. Daniel Arcaya. The third speaker in charge of the practicability is Mr. Billy Ray Legaspina. Lastly, the rebuttalist of the negative side is Mr. Joshua Mata Chongzon.
Of course, this debate would not be complete without our judges as well as our debate moderator. We are pleased to have our distinguished panel of judges for today's debate. Ladies and gentlemen, our first judge is a licensed teacher, a Master in Science of Teaching major in English, a Master of Arts in Education major in School Administration and Supervision, a Doctor in Development Education, and currently studying law at the University of Visayas is no other than Dr. Daryl Al Falcon. A round of applause, please.
Our second judge is also a licensed
The
normal
profoundness of my arguments. So,
university.
of my arguments.
She also
so one of the fact that
graduated
it's one of the most reasons. reasons.
He also graduated Master of Arts in Education, major in Social
EDCA is legal.
Studies from the
The
same
modernization program, the modernization of armed forces of the Philippines, under the MDT Article 2, Manila and Washington agreed to separately and jointly by self-help and mutual aid will maintain and develop their individual and collective capacity to resist armed attack. Armed attack.
He is he also graduated Master of Arts in Education, major in Social Studies from the same university. He is currently a social science coordinator and a member of the faculty teaching humanities and social sciences subjects. Let's give a round of applause to Mr. Stefan Rose Tiopis. Our third judge started teaching in 1975 when UC was known then as Cebu Central Colleges or CCC. Subjects taught are logic, philosophy of men, ethics, sociology, and anthropology. He earned a degree in AB Philosophy at University of Santo Tomas Central Seminary. He also graduated Master of Arts in Anthropology at San Carlos University. He is no other than Professor Eric Salvador Gabutin. A round of applause, please. Okay, last but not the least, the fourth judge is AAP. I'm sorry, wait. The fourth judge is a professor of AB PolSci, University of Cebu main campus, and he is ongoing a Master of Arts in Political Science at University of San Jose Recoletos. He is no other than Professor Ricardo Jeric Api III. A round of applause, please. For the exhibition debate, it will be moderated by no other than the chairperson of the political science program and a beloved and ever supported professor, Dr. Romel T. Himarangan. A round of applause, please. Mechanics and rules. The debate will employ the modified Oxford Oregon format. Speakers are designated as to the issue be raised thus. First affirmative speaker shall tackle the issue on necessity. First negative speaker shall tackle the issue on non-necessity. Second affirmative speaker shall tackle the issue on beneficiality. And second negative speaker shall tackle the issue on non-beneficiality. Third affirmative speaker shall tackle the issue on practicability. And third negative speaker shall tackle the issue on non-practicability. Fourth negative speaker shall be responsible for the rebuttal, as well as the fourth affirmative speaker. The proposition to be debated is as follows. Resolved that PHUS Mutual Defense Treaty be abrogated. English language shall be used throughout the course of the debate, and proper decorum should be strictly observed. Audience must ensure that their microphones and camera are turned off during the duration of the debate so that the Board of Judges can listen clearly to the speakers. The audience is also hereby advised to refrain from giving unnecessary comments or noises. The following winners will be chosen based on a given criteria: Best Speaker, Best Debater, Best Rebuttalist, and Best Debating Team. The judges, based on their discussion, shall have the authority to determine who will be the best speaker and best debater. The winning team shall be determined by the majority decision of the Board of Judges. The decision of the Board of Judges shall be final and irrevocable. Rules on interpellation. Questions should primarily focus on arguments developed in the speech of your opponent. However, matters relevant and material to the proposition are admissible. Questioner and opponent should treat each other with courtesy. And once the questioning has begun, neither the questioner nor his opponent may consult a colleague. Questioner should ask brief and easily understandable questions. Answers should equally be brief. Categorical questions answerable by yes or no is allowed. However, opponent, if he choose, may qualify his answer why yes or why no. Questioner may not cut off a reasonable and qualifying answer, but he may cut off a nervous response with a statement such as a thank you, that is enough information, or your point is quite clear, or I'm satisfied. A questioner should not comment on the response of his opponent, and your opponent may refuse to answer ambiguous, irrelevant, or loaded questions by asking the questioner to rephrase or reform his question. Rules on rebuttal speech. Rebuttal speaker should point out clearly the fallacies committed by his opponent, stating clearly what particularly
AFP
statement
modernization.
or argument constitutes said
AFP
fallacy.
modernization.
If
AFP
not familiar
external
with the
defense.
fallacies of
Maritime
logic,
security.
the
Maritime domain
debater may
awareness.
counter arguments
Humanitarian
directly by
response in
stating
the
what
Philippines.
arguments or statement is incorrect or
Response
false.
in the Philippines.
For the team compositions, the team shall be composed of 4 bona fide political science majors in this institution. The order of speeches and time allotted. For the first affirmative speaker, constructive speech for 6 minutes. First negative speaker, interpolation of the first affirmative speaker for 3 minutes. First negative speaker, constructive speech for 6 minutes. First affirmative speaker, interpolation of the first negative speaker for 3 minutes. The same procedure shall be followed for the second and third speakers. A bell shall be rung once to signify the start of their speech, twice to signal that there is only 1 minute left, and thrice or more to signal the end of time allotted. A 6-minute break shall be given for each team in order to prepare their rebuttal speech. The negative bench begins with the rebuttal speech for 7 minutes, and the affirmative bench follows to present the rebuttal speech for 7 minutes. All right, the criteria are as follows. All right, just a little housekeeping now before we get to our debate proper. I encourage everyone to utilize the virtual background that we have provided if you haven't yet, especially the debaters, and to keep your camera on throughout the activity. All right, for our debaters, you must open your cameras, especially when it's your turn to give your speech. But if circumstances don't allow, you can turn off your cameras instead. Thank you. Now, without further ado, let us now proceed with the debate proper. We will turn the floor over to our moderator, Dr. Romel T. Himarangan.
Thank you, Marie and Melissa. Good afternoon, everyone.
Right, we apologize now for the technical problem. There's still something in your audio, sir.
Can I be heard now, Marie?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's better now.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. In 1951, Mutual Defense Treaty between the Philippines and United States of America was signed. The agreement entered into force in August 27, 1952. And among
And
others,
52 as to
the
1.
parties involved articulated desiring to declare publicly and formally their sense of unity and their common determination to defend themselves against external armed attack. But for the others, they would claim that the agreement is no longer relevant considering that we are already in the 21st century. And the agreement was crafted during the time of Cold War. And they argue that the dynamics of international relations and the international order have been substantially changed. So the query now is it necessary, beneficial, or even practicable to abrogate the said treaty? Or are we going to preserve the status quo? This would be addressed of today's debate, where the proposition resolved that Philippines, United States of America Mutual Defense Treaty be abrogated. Let's proceed to the debate proper. The moderator would like to call in the first speaker of the affirmative side, raising the issue on necessity. 6 minutes.
Excuse me, am I heard? Am I heard, sir?
Yes, you are, Miss Alvis.
Thank you. Tutela fidem trahit fidelas tutelam trahit. Protection draws allegiance, and allegiance draws protection. To our most respected adjudicators, diligent timekeeper, most promising spectators, highly valued guests, all hail opponents. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The proposition for today's debate is resolved that Philippine-U.S. Mutual Defense Treaty be abrogated. We, as today's proposition, have structured our case as follows. I, the first speaker of the affirmative side, will discuss the necessity to abrogate the Philippine-U.S. Mutual Defense Treaty with the following contentions. First, the Philippines-United States Mutual Defense Treaty isn't mutually necessary at all. This 71-year-old treaty of 1951 between Washington, D.C. and the Republic of the Philippines is of no life. 70 years now in a different time with different circumstances, different threats, and different rationale, and still of no high significance. Another problem is that America's supposed commitment remains ill-defined, thus making the treaty ambiguous per se. In the present case between the Republic of the Philippines versus People's Republic of China, the Washington, D.C. has no direct stake in the outcome between the Philippine-China spats, and America's past response reflected its distance from the controversy. The United States has consistently criticized China for its violent actions, but despite America's mutual defense treaty with the Philippines, Washington has avoided any confrontation with China. Moreover, Washington soft-pedaled its security commitment to avoid giving offense to Beijing, but creating an incentive for Manila to act irresponsibly. If Washington is willing to fight, it must pay the cost. But the question now is the United States willing to go to war just because for the Philippines' sake? How important is the Philippines to America? Meanwhile, Washington has offered its treaty ally what appears to be almost modest support. Now with this, could we expect an ally? With this very time, they haven't been with us. What could we expect in such a vague and weak treaty? Therefore, I say that the Mutual Defense Treaty is of no value and its abrogation is highly necessary. Second, there is an intended ambiguity. No doubt, having a mutual defense treaty with a superstate is useful. But being utterly dependent on it can also be problematic. And that's what happens in the Philippines right now. So problematic. And what happens this time is that even the slightest ambiguity in the treaty's details could significantly weaken Philippine security. Unfortunately for Manila, the treaty contains several ambiguous details which Beijing has exploited to advance its South China Sea ambitions. Even so, the United States is seemingly remarkably unperturbed with ambiguity. It's because Washington saw advantage in such ambiguity. What is the interest of the Philippines in this matter then? Even Washington is unbothered. Therefore, I say that the Mutual Defense Treaty is of no value and its abrogation is highly necessary. Third, the Visiting Forces Agreement is thus more of a political issue than it is military. The conditions of the Philippines bases the refusal to defend the Philippines from China and the lack of criminal accountability. Moreover, the Visiting Forces Agreement is another means of gaining political support of the Americans because seeing that this agreement is more in favor of the Americans than of the Philippines' interest. The title of the agreement, the Visiting Forces Agreement, is problematic in itself. It is misnomer if viewed in the Philippine perspective. The Philippines expects the U.S. to protect and defend our country during international disputes, although the agreement blatantly states that these U.S. forces are mere visitors of our country. This implies that the American military presence in the Philippines is not only temporary, but also does not guarantee that there is protection to be gained. It is not even explicitly stated in the agreement that should be there threats of the safety of the Philippines and its people, the Americans would aid. The agreement expounds mainly upon concerns regarding military personnel and property. Indeed, a strategic military partnership with the superstates is useful, but the sovereignty of the country should not be the price for such because such would defeat the very purpose of this said agreement. I haven't seen any mutual and I haven't seen any ally in this setup. The abrogation of the Philippine-U.S. Agreement is highly necessary. I rest my case. Good afternoon, everyone.
Let's proceed to the interpellation. But before that, the moderator would like to remind that questions should be anchored on the arguments raised by the speaker. And as much as possible, simplify. Make your question clear enough to be understood for everybody. The interpellator for 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. Good afternoon, Mr. Moderator. This question shall be answered only by yes or no. So first, have you read the Mutual Defense Treaty between the Philippines and the United States?
Yes, I did.
Yes. Are you aware that in Article 4 of the same treaty, it states that there are, any such armed attack and all measures taken as a result thereof shall be immediately reported to the Security Council of the United Nations?
Yes, I did, but only it's a report. There's no such move happened.
I don't need explanation.
Yes.
So do you think the United States have not helped us for years?
It helps us just minimally.
Minimally, wow, okay.
So do you believe that this treaty has significance for our peace?
Not literally, and not necessarily.
Only yes or no, Madam Speaker. Next, are you aware about the violent extremism or terrorism that has occurred in the Philippines and how the United States have helped us in resolving that?
Only the local ones, but they didn't defend us internationally.
Do you agree that this treaty help
Whoa!
us?
What the? Oh my god.
Minimally.
Have you read the entirety of the Mutual Defense Treaty? Okay.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Would you agree that the said article mandates that the state shall preserve peace because it is necessary for the enjoyment of democracy?
Yes, but it's not exercised.
Then, given the mentioned articles, would you agree that the MDT is necessary for the maintenance of peace and the preservation of Philippine democracy and its stability?
It's not really necessary because we have our own laws and it
No,
is
no, only yes
stipulated
or
in
no.
the. Okay, not necessarily.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Interpolator, Ms. Speaker. This time, let's have the first speaker of the negative side. He would raise the issue on non-necessity of today's proposition resolved that Philippines, United States of America Mutual Defense Treaty be abrogated for 6 minutes.
Am I audible? Okay, thank you. Um, there is at least one thing worse than fighting with allies, and that is to fight without them. Winston Churchill. A pleasant day to all of us, adjudicators, Mr. Moderator, the committee of this debate, colleagues on my side and the across, and the University of Cebu Political Science Society. I am Prince Ramses Badana, a proud student from the House of Yamato, representing the non-necessity side. The Mutual Defense Agreement, which binds the Philippines and the United States in mutual defense against armed assaults that would disturb both countries about peace and security, is riddled with uncertainties, with the conditions under which the United States would respond to the assistance of its partner. Despite developing dynamics in the bilateral ties, including the American history that continues to cast a long shadow on many Filipinos, military cooperation has been a hallmark. However, this House believes that the abrogation of such is not necessary because they would cost certainly outweigh the benefits. The agreement states that they will settle any international conflicts in which they may get engaged in peaceful means in such a way that the world peace will not be jeopardized, and that they will refrain from using force in any of the United Nations objectives. It further declared that the parties individually and collectively shall preserve and enhance their individual and collective capacity to resist an armed assault by self-help and mutual aid. Each party acknowledges that an armed assault in the Pacific area on either of the parties would endanger its peace and security. And as a result, all actions must be immediately disclosed to the United Nations Security Council. This treaty shall not affect and shall be regarded as not affecting the parties' rights and duties under the United Nations Charter. The Republic of the Philippines and the United States of America must also ratify it by the provision of its constitution. This agreement was signed on August 30, 1951, led by the then top diplomat representing our country, Carlos Romulo. In a speech by Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana during the 70th anniversary of the Mutual Defense Treaty, he identified three key considerations on why the treaty should be reviewed. First is the reiteration and further clarification of the precise extent of American commitments to the Philippines. Second are revisions and addition to the MDT. And finally is the acquisition of more advanced weapon system. According to the Secretary himself, it is to be noted here that he is not necessarily calling for the abrogation of the treaty, but the preservation of such by reviewing the Mutual Defense Treaty. Moreover, according to the Congressional Research Service of the United States of America, the United States and the Republic of the Philippines have maintained a strong relationship characterized by bilateral security partnerships, considerable joint military exercises, tight people-to-people contacts, and several shared security and economic interests.
I have a
prove this
question for you. This
long-time
is answerable yes
relationship,
or no.
the
Kindly
Philippines
refrain
have
from
fought
qualifying
Muslim
your answer.
separatist group
If
on Mindanao,
there's
not
no
just the
need to
Muslims. This
qualify.
group include
If there's no need to
MNLF,
request as
MILF,
such,
BIFF,
request as
the
such.
Maoti
Do you
Group,
understand the word
Al-Jamaa
constitutional?
al-Islamiyah, Abu
Do you
Sayyaf
agree with
Group,
me
and
that ratified
CPP, NPA,
agreement in
and
our
DF.
jurisprudence
It
is
is evident
considered
that the United
constitutional?
States has helped the Philippines, including the recent
It
Battle of
is. It
Marawi
is.
in 2017.
It is.
They
It
have,
is.
they have provided us with intelligence reports, equipment, and logistics for our armed forces. Given the treaty champions peace and renounces war, hence it is necessary to preserve the MDT because its provisions correspond to the needs of the Constitution of maintaining peace for the enjoyment of democracy. The call for the abrogation of such is not only non-essential, but at the same time it endangers our territories, as according to retired General Emmanuel T. Bautista, after the mutual basis agreement was discontinued, China atrociously occupied the Mischief Reef in 1995. Abrogating the Mutual Defense Treaty will open all sorts of avenue to assert their dominance in the region. For well over a century, the United States has supported, nourished, and safeguarded the Philippines to simplify this argument. The Mutual Defense Treaty between the Republic of the Philippines and the United States of America should not be repealed, abolished, or abrogated, but rather reviewed, reinforced, and expanded to ensure peace and security. This representation therefore concludes that it is not necessary to abrogate and agree to the proposal made by our
200
opponents, as our country will lose a significant
228
amount
billion
of
pesos in the investment
opportunities
of
of
country's
boosting our
development
defense
goals
sector.
was given by the
I will
United
leave you with
States.
this quote by our war hero
United
and then
States.
President
Statistically, that's a lot
John
of
F.
money.
Kennedy.
Statistically,
Geography has made us neighbors, history has made us friends, economics has made us partners, and necessity has made us allies. Those whom nature had so joined together, let no man put asunder. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's have the interpellation. The same reminders pointed out earlier. Let's now call in the interpellator of the first speaker of the affirmative side for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. Do you believe that America is an ally?
Yes.
Being so, this just means that they must be present within the parameters of conflict, right?
Yes.
But in the presence of threat, Philippines, China, this maritime disputes, where are they? Are they with us? Yes or no?
Yes, they are with us.
Okay, okay. Is the presence of an ally in time of in time and place of dispute necessary? Yes or no?
Necessary, yes.
Okay, thank you. In the South China Sea and nearby waters, we have witnessed optic maritime gray zone tactics to include dangerous maneuvers by Chinese vessels, use of water cannons by Chinese Coast Guard vessels, and Chinese harassment of Philippines fishermen near an island controlled by the Philippines, which is claimed by China. Now, do you consider this as an attack? Yes or no?
No.
Really? Okay, so in the presence of such attack, where is America? Where are the American troops?
Let the
Okay, okay.
I believe, Mr. Moderator, the question should be rephrased.
Okay, so in the presence of the of the attacks, so where are the Americans? Where are they situated in times that we need them? They're an ally, right? Where are they?
Mr. Moderator, can I answer this with outside the bounds of yes or no?
Yes, this is an open-ended question.
I think, Madam Speaker, the Americans have made their surveillance and they have gave us.
Okay, okay. I'm satisfied. Okay. So, are you aware that there are U.S. military bases in Manila? Yes or no?
Yes.
No, it was.
You aren't aware of such? Okay. Only yes or no. Okay. So, are you with me that having those paves away for external threats? Yes or no?
Come again,
Madam Speaker? Are you aware that those military bases inside Manila are paves away for external threats?
No, I think, Madam Speaker, the mutual basis agreement was discontinued in 1991.
Okay, now, How could the Philippines be assured with the protection enshrined in the letters of the treaty? Is there any guarantee? Name at least one section or provision thereof stating such.
Madam Speaker, Article 4 of
Okay,
the
Article 4.
NDT
Okay.
is
Article
enough
4 is
to
okay.
Let the speaker answer, finish his answer first. Go ahead.
Okay, Article 4 is Article 4 of the MDT is enough to satisfy your question, Madam Speaker.
Okay. I don't know what to say since the Honorable Speaker is so agreeable to my position. Gracias, Agroscivic, Orator Honeste. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What?
Okay, thank you, Miss Interpellator, Mr. Speaker. This time, the moderator would like to call in the second speaker of the affirmative side to raise the issue on beneficiality of today's proposition for 6 minutes.
America is historia Philippine creatio principes et nationalismo. America was made by history. Philippines is created by principles in nationalism. Honorable adjudicators, distinguished guests, fair moderators, worthy opponents, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I, the second affirmative speaker, would like to continue by addressing the beneficiality of the proposition as the parameter has been set by the necessity resolved that the Philippine-U.S. Mutual Defense Treaty be abrogated. Now, allow me to present my contentions regarding the beneficiality of the proposition. First, abrogating the Philippine-U.S. Mutual Defense Treaty would give the Philippines more leeway in its pursuit of improving its military capability. From the report of hybrid polling and Cronin in CIS South China Sea Conference, stated that the Philippines relied mainly on excess defense articles, military assistance, and foreign military sales program run by the U.S. to purchase weapons and equipment for external defense. Moreover, according to Sani Ivan from her Journal of Political Risk, that for the decades, the strengthening of the Philippine military and external defense capability has been neglected. First, it is overly dependent on the United States for its external defense. And after the Second World War, the Philippines has been independent by the United States, with which it continued to be a primary regional ally and received development and military aid. Thus, this dependence on the United States for its military development was one of the reasons for negligence of its own national defense capabilities. It further contends that in the Philippines, one of the reasons why the armed forces of the Philippines was not modernized is the belief that its friendly relations with the neighbors would protect them from an invasion and armed attacks. The hope rested in other countries following the same rule of justice and peace as suggested in Article 2, Section 2 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution. And as we now know, the ideal of peace and justice only works when both parties show it respect. With that said, I held that the proposition is highly beneficial. Second, when such treaty is of no use, opting to abrogate the said would further be beneficial. On the face of it, the Philippines' security situation is puzzling. The country has a mutual defense treaty with the United States, the world's strongest military power. Yet, China regularly intrudes into what the Philippines claims as its territorial waters in the South China Sea, denies the Philippine fishing boats access to these waters, in which it's still part of the Exclusive Economic Zone, or the EEZ, and when the opportunity affords, it occupies Philippine claim features in the region. The Chinese embassy officials did not immediately react to Delphine Lorenzana, the Secretary of the Philippine National Defense, remarks in September 16, 2021 in Manila. China has warned the U.S. not to intervene in what it says is a purely Asian dispute that the government in the region are trying to resolve peacefully through negotiation. So Washington lays no claims in the disputed waters, but has declared that the peaceful resolution of the dispute. Yet, the U.S. is still nowhere to the giving resolution between the two countries. Such an ally of the Philippines hasn't given action to the current conflict in the Philippines. I held the proposition is highly beneficial. And for my third contention, the main concern regarding the visiting forces agreement is that it abuses the U.S. economy under the Philippine sovereignty. This agreement gives U.S. forces the right to utilize our territories for their own purposes, which has since been abused and could possibly do more harm than good to our resources. The Balikatan exercise, which are projected to improve Philippine military efforts benefits the U.S. forces more. The U.S. said that these exercises are to advance the Filipino military in terms of technology and weaponry brought by the Americans. However, these weapons are brought only during the Balikatan exercise, and after the Filipinos have been trained, the Americans will leave with the weapons, defeating the exercise purpose. Filipinos thus learn and be trained to utilize military technology they do not even possess. Okay, the VFA expects that the U.S. forces to aid in defending our territories against China. However, China has been slowly encroaching Philippine sandbars and waters over the years since the U.S. has left the Philippines in 1980s. So the U.S. has yet to do anything about this matter. Furthermore, the U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton stated in 2013 that the U.S. would remain neutral during this conflict. This is brought up in the fact that the China owns roughly a $28.9 trillion of the U.S. bonds as of 2021, thus jeopardizing U.S.-China relations would subsequently jeopardize the U.S. economy, which is currently the Americans' priority rather than the security of the Philippine lands and waters. Therefore, I say that the MDT is no value and its abrogation is highly beneficial. Ladies and gentlemen, even the guarantees provided by the MDT, the Philippines cannot lean on the United States forever. We cannot forever be relying on others for our security. The Mutual Defense Treaty isn't functional for almost 71 years. Yeah, it do exist, but yeah.
Oh, cow. Yes. Yes.
Experience external attacks from other countries. Yet the U.S. doesn't do anything about it up until now. Are we still on stand with the sleeping treaty? With all the contentions being presented, I strongly contend that the proposition is highly beneficial.
To be honest.
Nunc in hoc requiem. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. Speaker.
You are tough.
Let's have the interpellation.
So tough as well.
Again, the moderator would like to remind for the interpellation, interpellators, refrain from making unnecessary comments. Okay, your role as an interpellator is to raise question, okay, or propound question, and for the speaker to simply respond on the query raised by the interpellator. Interpellation for 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. These questions shall be answered by yes or no only. So, aside from USA, other countries, would you agree that aside from USA, other countries do not have the same reputation of providing comprehensive training and support to our country?
Yes.
Okay. Would you agree that it's not just the weapons or the armaments or vehicles or equipments? Instead, it's using those to build real capabilities.
Yes.
Okay. Would you agree that the MDT helps in bolstering the armed forces?
No, let me qualify my answer. Okay, let's go back to Balikatan exercise where the U.S. force will come here in the Philippines and bring such a weapon just to train the Filipinos, and the Filipinos were not able to use it because the time when they wanted to go back to their country, they're gonna also bring those weapons as well as technologies.
Okay, thank you. So if no, are you aware of the VFA, which is signed in 1998, and the ADCA in 2014, where the purpose of this agreement is to boost and enhance our AFP forces?
Holy fuck.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, but yes, Mr. Interpolator, but let me qualify my answer. And one of the agreement gives, it also gives U.S. this forces to utilize such our territories. It actually doesn't give an advantage. It's because they wanted to stay here in their country. Specifically, it's not their own territory.
Okay, thank you. Do you think having a strong arming forces would deter any external armed attack?
Yes.
So if having a strong armed force would deter any external armed attack, would it foster peace?
Partly, yes.
So do you think peace is equivalent to economic growth?
Well, it depends, Mr. Interpolator.
But according to the World Bank, economic prosperity and peace are interlinked. So economic prosperity is peace, and peace are mutually reinforcing. So for the next
order. The moderator would like to remind the interpolator to refrain from making conclusion first. Just raise your question. Do not draw
Okay,
conclusion
okay.
first.
So for my next question, would you agree that the MDT is beneficial to the Philippines militarily and economically?
Come again, Mr. Interpolator.
Would you agree that the MDT is
Pakiap-
beneficial to the Philippines military and economic development?
Yes, Mr. Interpolator.
So, that would be all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Interpolator, and to the speaker. This time, we'll accommodate the second speaker of the negative side.
Oh my god.
We'll be presenting the issue on non-beneficiality of today's proposition for 6 minutes.
Good afternoon, members of the affirmative side, moderator, and our dear audience. On the negative side, ladies and gentlemen, we firmly believe that abrogating the Mutual Defense Treaty is not beneficial. It is unnecessary to abrogate since the cost would outweigh the benefits. Our relationship with the US is based on long-standing historical and cultural ties. The highlight of our relationship was the signing of the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty. It solidified
Come
our
again, Mr.
relationship,
Interpolator.
creating a solid foundation for a robust and secure connection between our countries. It sealed our mutual commitments to depend on each other against external armed attacks. The affirmative side claimed that abrogating the Mutual Defense Treaty is beneficial, but giving the depiction of the necessity to keep the Mutual Defense Treaty, allow me to dwell on the benefits of preserving it. The benefits of preserving the MDT includes the following. First, it strengthens our maritime security. Second, it counters terrorism. Third, it is economically beneficial. And of course, last but not the least, it develops our engagement in humanitarian and disaster assistance. Allow me to expand on the benefits, starting with
Mr.
the first
Interpolator, that's not
benefit.
part of the argument.
It strengthens
That's not
our
part of the
maritime
argument.
security. Article 4 of the MDT reads, each party recognizes that an armed attack in the Pacific area on either of the parties would be dangerous to its own peace and safety, and declares that it would act to meet the common dangers in accordance with its constitutional processes. The U.S., notably the Biden administration and the U.S. Defense Secretary, Secretary Austin, affirmed that an armed attack on the Philippines forces, public vessels, and aircraft in the Pacific, including the South China Sea, would trigger the U.S. obligation to stand alongside its ally. The clear evidence of this effort has been the delivery of several major defense equipments and weapon systems in recent years, including the AFP modernization effort. So the U.S. Embassy in the Philippines also shows that Philippines received the most militarily aid from the United States in the Indo-Pacific region. Since 2015, the U.S. has given the Philippines more than 48.6
There's a
billion
need to
in
ratify
security aid.
MDT according to
Following
MDT
the
Article 7.
growing
Article 7
U.S.
MDT
Philippines
requires
alliance,
ratification.
Eleanor Albert says that the Philippines is continuously bolstering its armed forces. In late 2012, it passed a revised AFP Modernization Act to invest in equipment and weapons for the Naval Air Force and Army capacities. The country is advancing towards militarily independence, but the AFP has substantial ground to cover. In a forum with the U.S. Secretary Lorenzana says that our security cooperation with the U.S. is vital in securing an advanced weapon system towards a minimum deterrent capability against the external threats. On to my next benefit on how it is beneficial. It is beneficial in counterterrorism. The U.S. worked alongside the Philippines to counter terrorism. Notably, when the U.S. Army Special Operations Forces and Allied Contingent of the Philippines 18 Special Forces Company conducted joint training that covered a variety of counterterrorism subjects and exercises. The U.S. and the Philippines troops continue to develop their counterterrorism tactics and skills using the knowledge and experience obtained through training shoulder to shoulder. The joint training also helped enhance the military ties between the United States and the Philippines that have existed for many years. The two countries are presently involved in combating terrorism in the southern Philippines through a joint military exercise called Barikatan. Onto my third benefit on how it has been economically beneficial. With the Philippines-USA bilateral relation, the
228
Department
billion
of Foreign Affairs assures
military
that national
assistance.
security, ensuring that no external attack will happen. Instead, we will focus on expanding and pursuing economic growth without considering military incapability and easy access to military power.
This is more than
With nearly
228 billion.
18.9 billion in goods and services traded in
228
2020,
billion pesos.
the United States and the Philippines continues to
Pesos.
enjoy a strong trade investment relationship.
Statistics.
The United
Mr.
States
Speaker,
in the
statistics
Philippines
shows
is the Philippines'
has
third biggest commercial
invested
partner. It is
228
also
billion
one of the
pesos
country's largest foreign
military
investors.
assistance to the
Furthermore,
Philippines.
national security is now equated not only to traditional notions of national defense and regime survival, but also to the promotion of economic development and the protection of the environment and natural resources. It is also important to note that our alliance is anchored not just on strengthening security, rather it is anchored in a much broader intention. Leading me to my next benefit, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. The relevance of the agreement between the Philippines and the US continued particularly during the height of the pandemic. In the fight against COVID-19, the United States stands with the Philippine government and the Filipino people. An audit from the US aid shows that US
According to the
assistance
Office of the United States
underscore
Trade
our long-standing
Representative,
commitment to our Philippine
almost 228
friends,
billion pesos.
partners, allies in times of need. The affirmative side might disagree. They may believe that abrogation of such a treaty is necessary and beneficial. However, it is obvious by pointing out the evidence of its benefits that MDT contributes to strengthening maritime security. It counters terrorism, developing humanitarian and disaster assistance, and economic operation. This treaty shall remain in force indefinitely. That is why this House strongly negates the call for the treaty's abrogation for beneficial reason. Thank you.
Excuse me, Sir Himarangan, you cannot be heard, sir.
Okay, let's proceed to the interpellation. The moderator would like to call in the second speaker of the affirmative side. Interpellation for 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. Okay. Am I heard? Like he's not responded.
Yes.
Proceed.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, are you aware of the South China Sea dispute? Okay.
Sir, would you like to respond? Restate the question, Mr. Interpolator.
Okay. Are you aware of the South China Sea dispute?
Yes.
Okay. Have you read Article 1 of the said treaty or the MDT treaty?
Yes.
I did.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Then I am sure that you are aware that the parties involved in the treaty must intervene by any international disputes that threaten the peace and security of the country.
Well, Ms. Speaker, we defend using the right. We already defend using. We defend using the rights we had as a sovereign nation to protect its interests to the rule of law, and that was recognized by the arbitral tribunal decision. So we just had to continue to support the arbitral ruling.
Hey, cut just look.
Question, Mr. Interpolator. If there's any, proceed, please.
Yes, sir. Okay, are you with me when I'm going to say that the U.S. hasn't done anything with the conflict between the Philippines and China with regards to the South?
Come again, Ms. Speaker.
Say that the U.S. hasn't done anything with the conflict between the Philippines and China with regards to South China Sea.
No, the United States and the Philippines expressed their support.
Yeah, I think you. Okay.
National law of the sea.
Thank you. But it's okay. Thank you. Okay. Do you mean that we should abrogate the treaty because it doesn't conform with the provisions?
No.
Okay? Are you aware that on December 18, the Secretary of National Defense, Delphine Lorenzana, ordered a review of the Philippine U.S. Mutual Defense
I'm
Treaty?
very.
Yes, Miss Speaker. He ordered a review but not abrogation.
Miss Interpolator. Okay, time is up. Thank you, Miss Interpolator, Mr. Speaker. This time, let's have the third speaker of the affirmative side to raise the issue on the practicability of today's proposition for 6 minutes.
Sapere aude, dare to know. Reputable Board of Judges, honorable guests, fair moderator, cautious timekeeper, colleagues, opponents, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I, the third affirmative speaker, would like to proceed by addressing the practicability of the proposition resolved that Philippine-U.S. Mutual Defense Treaty be abrogated. At the present, an impressive number of bilateral treaties establishing a complex and expanding network of rules are enforced between the members of the community of nations. As time goes and circumstances change, the problem of whether and to what extent a treaty is mutually compatible assumes increased importance. And as the necessity and beneficiality of the abrogation of the said treaty has been provided by our House, allow me to present to you the arguments firming the practicability of the proposition. First, there are no constitutional impediments as to the abrogation of the Philippine-U.S. Mutual Defense Treaty. The 1987 Constitution provides only the rule to govern the act of entering into a treaty or the international agreement, but prescribe absolutely nothing about withdrawing from it. Specifically, the Charter states, no treaty or international agreement shall be valid and effected unless concurred in by at least two-thirds of all the members of the Senate. Article 7, Section 21. Thus, it doesn't mean that MDT cannot be abrogated. Now, it could be recalled that MDT was concurred in by the Senate, and since the Constitution expressly provides for shared treaty-making power of the executive and legislative, it necessarily implies that the power to abrogate the same must also be exercised jointly. Also, this is to protect the interest of the Filipino people in accordance to Article 2, Section 1 of the 1987 Constitution, proclaiming the basic principle of our system of government, that the Philippines is a democratic and republican state and that sovereignty resides in the people and all government authority emanates from them. To solidify, we cite the Supreme Court decision in Pangilinan versus Cayetano, GR number 238875, that the President cannot unilaterally withdraw from treaties that were entered into pursuant to the legislative intent manifested in prior laws or subsequently affirmed by succeeding laws. Treaties where Senate concurrence for accession is expressly premised on the same concurrence for withdrawal likewise cannot be subject to unilateral withdrawal. Therefore, it is highly practical to abrogate the said treaty. Second, abrogating the MDT is feasible in the changing tide of Philippine international affairs and in pursuit of country's independent foreign policy. Under 1987 Constitution Article 2 Section 1, the state shall pursue independent foreign policy in its relation with other states. Paramount consideration shall be national sovereignty, territorial integrity, national interest, and the right to self-determination. Now, as a citizens of the Philippines, and in this case, political science students, we should not confuse our personal principles with what the Constitution stipulates. We should not close our minds from understanding and taking into account what an independent foreign policy essentially means, which is, with emphasis, amity with all nations as enshrined in Article 2, Section 2. The Philippines renounces war as an instrument of national policy, adopts the generally accepted principles of international law as part of the law of the land, and adheres to the policy of peace, equality, justice, freedom, cooperation, and amity
Mr. Speaker, I
with
have that
all
question
nations.
answerable by yes
Let's
or no.
look at Switzerland as an example of a country that is on amity with all nations. To recount, our diplomatic history has been that of dependence on another's foreign policy. Respectfully, it is aligned to the United States. Henceforth, our foreign policy will reject foreign intrusion. Time-honored principles of sovereign equality, non-interference, and commitment to the peaceful settlement of disputes will be observed. Our national interest must now come first. But let me add, without forgetting, that we live in an interdependent world. consonance to what our House Second Speaker have argued, thus abrogating the said treaty will make us a country that does not only practice its independent foreign policy but also will not be aligned to any sphere of influence, not just of the US, but by countries who are seeking hegemony in the Indo-Pacific region. It must be emphasized that abrogating this treaty does not mean cutting ties with the US. And as a sovereign country, interstate partnership is vital, but not to the expense of our national interest and proper mutual compatibility. Ladies and gentlemen, requiring each to come to the aid of the other is the essence of mutual defense treaty. Yet during the territorial disputes we had in China, US did not intervene. So what is the point of holding on to a treaty that is deemed useless? Thus, with all this, I strongly contend that the proposition is highly practical. Ad Meloria Vertamor, let us turn to better things. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Speaker. Let's have the interpolation by the third speaker of the negative side for 3 minutes.
Miss Speaker, I have a question for you. This is answerable by yes or no. First question, do you understand the word constitutional?
Yes.
Do you agree with me that a ratified agreement in our jurisprudence is considered constitutional?
Yes.
Have you read the preamble of the Mutual Defense Treaty?
Yes, I did.
Do you agree with me that the purpose of the preamble in an agreement is to give an introductory understanding of an intent and a policy?
Yes.
Have you read the preamble of the... do you agree with me that MDT's preamble constitute the virtues of our Constitution?
Yes.
Do you agree with me that MDT is constitutional?
Yes, because the
Are
provision
you familiar
of
with the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement?
Order. Let the speaker finish first. Okay, proceed, Miss Speaker.
Proceed to qualify.
Thank you, sir. Yes, because the provision of EDCA are consistent with the Philippine Constitution laws and jurisprudence.
Okay. Are you familiar with the EDCA?
Yes.
Are you aware that EDCA is an annex agreement of MDT?
Yes.
Are you aware that EDCA provides AFP modernization, external defense, maritime security, maritime domain awareness, and humanitarian response in the Philippines?
Partly.
Are you aware that if you abrogate MDT, it will also abolish EDCA, as it serves supplemental agreement?
Yes.
Are you willing to abolish EDCA to abrogate MDT?
Yes.
Thank you, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Interpolator and Miss Speaker. This time, it's the turn of the third speaker of the negative side, raising the issue on non-practicability of today's proposition resolved that PH-US Mutual Defense Treaty be abrogated for 6 minutes.
An independent foreign policy shall be geared towards bolstering cooperative and harmonious relation with all the countries. Guests, judges to our fair and competent moderator, debaters of the affirmative side, audience, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. We, on the negative bench, recognize that the current issue of the Philippines and the United States abrogating the 1951 MDT may be handled by using jurisprudence in line with the 1987 Philippine Constitution. We recognize that proving our point is more difficult, but we soldier on, because today we get to express our contention. We get to show everyone that the affirmative side isn't always perfect in interpreting the law. We get to show you the variety of principle and perspective to all of this. Before today's proposition about abrogating MDT, I want to strip this down so we can fully understand the pure essence of this debate. The MDT between the Republic of the Philippines and the United States of America, a treaty that was signed in 1951, contains 8 articles and dictates for both nations to support each other if an external party attacks in the Philippines or the United States. History-wise, we reflect on the rich history of our alliance and the continuing relevance of the Treaty of Peace, Security, and Prosperity in the Asia-Pacific region. We are certain that it was unnecessary and impractical for the following compelling reasons. Abrogating mutual defense also means abrogating the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, or EDCA, as a consequence. Second, the National Security Strategy, or the NSS, supports Article 2, Section 5 of our Constitution and Article 7 of the MDT. Third, MDT is constitutional. Allow me now, ladies and gentlemen, to expound the profoundness of my arguments. The Mutual Defense Treaty obligated the United States and the Philippines to maintain and develop their individual and collective defense capabilities, which constitute the creation of EDCA. The Supreme Court decision upholding EDCA's legality hopes to increase the interoperability of our armed forces and contribute to its modernization, as he quoted. EDCA is legal. The modernization of the armed forces of the Philippines under the MDT Article 2, Manila and Washington agreed to separately and jointly by self-help and mutual aid will maintain and develop their individual and collective capacity to resist armed attack. The provision has been a basis for various efforts in complementing Manila's initiative to modernize the AFP, particularly through the transfer of assets and equipment as well as through the exercise and training activities. This has been reaffirmed under EDCA. Now, according to Secretary of National Defense, Mr. Lorenzana, the United States has become increasingly supportive to the total development of the modernization program of the armed forces of the Philippines, upholding its promise to the protection of our democracy, following Article 12, Section 4 of the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement stated, "This agreement shall have an initial term of 10 years, and thereafter it shall continue in force automatically." Signed 28th of April 2014. That means you cannot touch EDCA until 2024. Therefore, you cannot abrogate the Mutual Defense Treaty because it contradicts the supplemental agreement of EDCA. Now, since EDCA is considered lawful by the Supreme Court, it abides by the principle of our Constitution. For that reason, abolishing EDCA to abrogate MDT serves unconstitutional by any means. Now, keep that in mind as I acquaint my argument forward. To defend our sovereignty and integrity of our national territory, we will continue to develop and improve our defense, intelligence, law enforcement capabilities. Guided by this, we crafted the national security strategy that articulates our roadmap in building a stronger nation. Signed, President Roa Duterte, May 2018. Chapter 6 of the Enhanced National Security Organization stipulated in the key features of strategic actions affirm, promote amity and cooperation with all the nations by enhancing bilateral relations, strengthening alliances and strategic partnership, and developing new security of cooperation and agreements, and shall be geared toward bolstering cooperative harmonious relations to all the countries in a bilateral form, regional and multilateral level, promoting development through international cooperations and economic diplomacy. Article 2, Section 5 of the Constitution also support the maintenance of peace and order, the protection of life and liberty. Section 7 also mentioned in its relation with the other states that paramount consideration shall be national sovereignty, territorial integrity and national interest, and the right to self-determination of our Constitution. In relation to MDT's preamble stated, the preservation of peace and security pending the development of a more comprehensive system of regional security in the Pacific area. Article 7 of the Mutual Defense also mentioned this treaty shall be ratified by the Republic of the Philippines and the United States of America in accordance with their respective constitutional processes. Now, it is very clear to us that the Mutual Defense Treaty abides with the National Security Organization in upholding the national interest that includes the protection of people, ways of life, welfare and well-being, strengthening the country's democratic institution, and safeguarding its territory. And its constitutionality as mentioned in Article 2, Section 5 and 7 of our Constitution to Article 7 of the MDT. The Philippines will be in a losing position if the MDT is abrogated. As you can see, I've made 3 contentions in this case, all of which supported the fact that we already stated why MDT is allowed under Article 2, Section 5 of our Constitution. We also explained abrogating MDT is impossible because of the active annex agreement of EDCA. We also explained the legality of Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement and explains the contribution of agreement to our national security. We explained to you that the National Security Organization supports MDT. We discussed why abrogating the Mutual Defense Treaty is unconstitutional. The affirmative side cannot seem to negate our argument nor prove their point. It is with this that we insist respectfully but firmly. It is not practicable in any way. Once again, good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's now the interpellation by the third speaker of the affirmative side for 3
It's
minutes.
not power.
Good afternoon, Mr. Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. My question is only answerable by yes or no. Would you agree with me that the Philippines is a sovereign state and that can stand on its own 2 feet and can pursue an independent foreign policy as written in the Constitution?
Yes.
Yes or no? Thank you. Since you said yes, can the Philippines successfully pursue its independent foreign policy with the MDT that ties it with the interest and the foreign policy of the United States?
Yes.
Yes or no? Thank you. Are you aware that US is not an ally and a friend to all countries with consideration to the current international situation?
It's factual, yes.
Since you said yes, I will ask again, can the Philippines successfully pursue an independent foreign policy when they're tied with the interest of the US through the MDT?
Can you enlighten me that?
Okay. Can the Philippines successfully pursue an independent foreign policy when they are tied with the interest and foreign policy of the US through the MDT?
Article 7 of the MDT
Mhm.
already shows that it's ratified, and
Thank you. I'm satisfied with your answer. Given that would you agree with me that it is only practical?
Let the speaker answer.
Okay.
Are you done, Miss Speaker? Mr.
yeah, I would
Speaker?
like to
in
qualify
answering?
my answer. So Article 7 shows that there's a need to ratify MDT before we accept MDT, right? So in accordance, it's stipulated here that both nation respects its constitutional processes. So I don't think there's any violation to that.
Okay,
you.
proceed, Miss Interpolator.
Thank you. Do you agree with me that Philippine military capability is extremely lower than that of the US?
Absolutely.
Then considering the current play of international states relation in the advent that an external force attacks the US, would that put the Philippines at much worse losing end?
Is there time for answer?
More?
Okay.
The speaker may answer.
Oh, okay. Could you please enlighten me the question? It was
Okay. Would you agree with me that US is not necessarily bound to immediately react?
no, they're bound. It's stated in the MDT. As soon as there's an external arm attack, it will trigger MDT. That's automatic.
Thank you. For the enlightenment of the audience, Article 4 of the treaty states that it would act to meet the common dangers in accordance with its constitutional process, which means that it has to go to the Congress for its decision. Correct?
Exactly. That's why there's Article 7 for that.
So I asked again, if the Philippines is the one being attacked, would you agree with me that US is not necessarily bound to immediately react? Thank you.
The speaker may answer.
Okay. Like I said, the MDT stipulated that as soon as there is an external arm attack and it's proven wise, then it will trigger the MDT. That's my answer.
Time is up. Thank you, Miss Interpolator
Thank you,
and Mr. Speaker. This time, the moderator would like to turn you over to the MCs for some announcements while our debaters are preparing for their respective rebuttal speech.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Himarangan. No, again, while the rebuttalists are finalizing their speech, we will have an intermission number by one of our PolSci's Nightingale. Let us listen to the golden voice of our very own Miss Maria Shaina Mahipos. Let us give her a round of applause, please. All right, there has been a technical problem. Again, let's give it up for Miss Maria Shaina Mahipos. Yes, indeed. No, by Mr. Penatel. Siya ni Poli ang ni Ma'am Nora Honor as being the golden voice.
Proven wise. The trigger. There's reason.
Pangunahan sa pagkakaroon sa imo di pa ko ganahan. Kayog na agyud dugay na takang gihawiran. Ingano kung dili kung nagyoy feelings. Ingano kung dili kung nagyoy something. Adunag yo'y mga butang at kinahanglang di ipukus. Di san maayo ang ibalikan nimo kung mga galugon. Flowers, tsokolate, pahumut, merienda, pati na teddy bear. Bisan unsa na lang imong ipanghatag, ano lang ka ma-remember. Unsa man gyud ang akong dapat buhaton, aron di na ko nimo gukod-gukuron. Kayog na agyud di na jud tagalisod-lisuro. Ingano kong dili kung nagyo'y feelings. Ingano kong dili kung nagyo'y something. Adunag yo'y mga butang at kinahanglang di ipukus. Di san maayo ang ibalikan nimo kung mga galugos. But we know the only thing that goes on in this world is change. Maong di san maayo mo promise, basan my mind mo kulit lang change. Ingano kung dili ang nagyo'y feelings. Ingano kung dili ang nagyo'y something. Adunag yo'y mga butang at kinahanglang di ipukus. Di san maayo ang ibalikan nimo kung mga galugos. Ingano kung dili ug nagyo'y feelings. Ingano kung dili ug nagyo'y something. Adunag yo'y mga butang at kinahanglang di ipukus. Di san maayo ang ibalik nimo kung mga galugos. lubos. Hingano kong dili.
Again, that was Miss Maria Shaina Mahipos. So since recorded naman to siya, no, let us see the face, the beautiful face of Miss Maria Shaina Mahipos. Can you please open your camera and wave to the camera, to the audience? Hi, all right. Thank you so much, no, for blessing us with that very beautiful and heartwarming song cover. We wish we could hear more of that, but we must resume to our activity. Perhaps we can hear more from you, Pohon. At this note, allow us to give the floor back to our moderator, Dr. Ramel P. Himarangan.
Thank you, Marie. Let's now proceed to the presentation of rebuttal speech of each side. We'll begin with the rebuttalist of the negative side. Now, for the content of the rebuttal speech, it presents two major parts. One is the summary of team's arguments, and second is refuting the arguments raised by the other side by presenting the fallacies committed of such opposing side. Ladies and gentlemen, the moderator would like to call in the rebuttal speaker of the negative side for 7 minutes.
Am I audible? Clear?
Yes, you are, Mr. Chongson.
Thank you. Thank you. A proverbial truth holds that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Judges, Mr. Moderator, speakers, MCs, technical team, guests, spectators, good afternoon. On one of his sonas, President Rodrigo Duterte said that if we are to embrace a vision of a prosperous Philippines, we have to uphold our national interests in the international community. We will uphold our national interests in the international community. We will strengthen and seek partnership with those who share our values. We will engage nations with full respect for the rule of law, sovereign equality, and again, non-interference. Taking notes from the arguments presented from both ends of the proposition, let me consolidate why our stance regarding the non-necessity, non-beneficiality, and non-practicability of the abrogation of the MDT should prevail. If we are to bring our attention to the affirmative's first position, they argued that the MDT is not mutually necessary and has no high significance. They anchored their argument on the lack of action from US during China's aggression in the West Philippine Sea. This is a fallacy of ignorantium, because they failed to consider the existence of US policy on the South China Sea document, which was printed in 1995, which condemned China's encroachment of the Mischief Reef as enumerated on its 4 pillars. Hence, US has been condemning China's action since 1995. But this action corresponds to the treaty because they engage on peaceful means. Hence, the treaty was operational. They also claim that China has exploited the treaty's ambiguity. To that we ask, how much more if we abrogate it? They also argue that the MDT should be abolished because US failed to protect the Philippine sovereignty when China occupied some of its exclusive economic zones. But mind you, according to Article 56 of UNCLOS, the Philippines only has sovereign rights over EEZs and not sovereignty per se. Therefore, the sovereignty of the Philippines was not at stake during that event. If it was, then we could have expected US would have retaliated more aggressively if it was, but it wasn't. As a contention, we argued that the abrogation of the MDT is not only non-essential, but is also dangerous. Because history has taught us that a loosened alliance with the US could open avenues for China to assert their dominance in the region, as to what happened in 1995 when they occupied the Mischief Reef. We maintain that the review for MDT should be directed only to its reinforcement and expansion, not its abrogation. With regards to their third position, they argued that the abrogation of the MDT would improve the sorry, scratch that out. Moving forward to their second position, they argued that the strengthening of the MDT has been neglected. However, they failed to acknowledge the existence of supplementary agreements like the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Treaty and Visiting Forces Agreement, which aims to recalibrate and reinforce the provisions of the MDT, since hence it was not neglected. They also argued that if the Philippines break away from its ties with US, it would give more leeway to the Philippines AFP modernization. But they failed to establish evidence how the country would sustain the 2018-2022 National Security Strategy requirement, which calls for a minimum annual defense budget of 2% of the country's GDP. The question is, how is that a leeway? As a contention, we invoke the operational and strategic aspects of the treaty, which ushers benefits to both of the parties, but all the more to the Philippines. In terms of operationality, the MDT has been instrumental to bolstering our defense posture. And in terms of strategic aspect, we argued that the MDT extends to economic growth, such as trade, commerce, and investments, and humanitarian reliefs as well. We argued that the national defense is now equated not only to traditional forms of national defense and regime survival, but also to the promotion of economic development and other benefits. With regards to their third position, they argued that the abrogation of the MDT would improve the amity of the Philippines in relation to other countries, but failed to establish with enough evidence that the MDT hinders that it hinders amity. Also, given that Article 1 of the MDT requires the Philippines to settle any international disputes by peaceful means, suggests that the MDT fosters amity rather than hinder it, because it requires the parties involved, the US and the Philippines, to have the idea of declaring a war as an afterthought. As a contention, we argue that the notion of abrogating MDT is plagued with impracticalities. Abrogating it is not only tantamount to ignoring the constitutional requirements of preserving peace and renouncing war set forth by sections 2 and 5 of Article 2, but it would also hinder the state from the pursuit of national sovereignty, territorial integrity, national interest, and the right to self-determination, which were the paramount considerations of the state upon ratifying this treaty, pursuant to Section 7 of Article 2. But not only that, it is also void of technicalities, because technically the EDCA being its annex agreement, abrogating the MDT also requires abrogating EDCA, which is problematic given that pursuant to Article 12, Section 4 of EDCA, it is untouchable until 2024. These arguments scaffolds the very foundation of the affirmative's position. And now that it has collapsed, duly refuted, debunked, and met with arguments that successfully negated such position, it should be resolved that the negative position prevails. The MDT should not be abrogated. In conclusion, the US-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty serves as a binding document that drives the US-Philippines bilateral relations forward. It was founded on trust, reciprocity, and responsive partnership. That is why 70 plus years after it was forged, it remained en route on its trajectory, because these virtues and the essence of mutuality remains intact. The passage of executive arguments that aims to reinvigorate the provisions such as EDCA and BFA further reiterates this. Under the light that we have proven the continued relevance of the MDT.
Thank you, the rebuttal speaker of the negative side. Now it's the turn of the affirmative side. Let's call in the rebuttal speaker of the affirmative side for 7 minutes.
Amnesis omnibus socios niliosus. International cooperation between states is feasible and sustainable, that such cooperation should reduce and conflict and competition. Reputable board of judges, adjudicator, fair moderators, members of opposing team, chair lady and audience, good day. I, the fourth affirmative speaker, would move on by asserting the rebuttal speech of the preposition. Resolve that Philippines United States Mutual Defense Treaty be abrogated. So, abrogating the Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty does not mean cutting all ties with the US, but instead it is not being dependent alone on their military defense. Speaking, and the speaker from the negative side emphasizes that the MDT abrogating is not required and it should be preserved. Yet the parameters were not served and the contention needed. It is necessary to abrogate the Philippines and US Mutual Defense Treaty, which is signed on August 30, 1951. This treaty was 70 years ago, a different time, a different circumstances, a different threat, and a different rationale. So to give you initially the original purpose of it was obviously to guard against the rearmed Japan through the Soviet Union constituted. But both of those are gone now and no longer timely. So first speaker of the negative side, you've mentioned that about the this beneficiality of the um, contention. And I would like to remind you that the scope that you have mentioned is not a necessity. You also mentioned, Mr. Badana, that literally you point out about siding, for example, the general defense emphasizes review on treaty. If you argue that it should be preserved, then why do the general defense of national Philippines defense, Delphin emphasizes that it should be reviewed? Does it mean that the feasibility and necessity of the contention is not valid? We also need to remember the fallacies that you have um, made, which is the ignorantio elenche for adopting the argument proving different conclusion. Again, saying the argument which is stated by the General Delphin of the National Defense Secretary falls under practicability and not the necessity. Therefore, to abrogate this treaty is necessary. Second, it is beneficial to abrogate this treaty. First, it gives the Philippines more leeway in pursuit. The rebuttalist from the negative side asks on what leeway? Well, to give you the concrete evidence for that one, according to the annual Global Firepower or the GFP report, the Philippine military with around 1,300 active military personnel, 100,000 reserves, and 50,000 paramilitaries had the power index score of 0.81, and it is being achievable if the Philippines will be abrogated the treaty. Also, it is beneficial because we know that the US is one of the strongest military army, yet when China regulars occupies the Philippines treasure in the region, no action executed by the US defense. Since having mutual defense treaty is one of the strongest power is useful, then why it's not executed? Facing the traditional and non-traditional defense also is not timely. Therefore, it is beneficial to abrogate the traditional treaty defense and creating instead modern defense, which is timely and relevant now, especially with what we have with the West Philippine Sea. And it is practical to abrogate the US Philippines MDT because it is feasible in changing tide of the Philippines international affairs of the country's independent foreign policy. The speaker from the third negative side, which is Mr. Legaspina, used the EDGA. Weren't you aware that on June 30, 2015, the total of 13 senators signed the resolution of abrogating the treaty? And I would like also to discuss with it that it is instituted under the Article 7 of Section 21 that no constitution stating that treaty or international agreement could be valid and effected unless concurred by at least two-thirds of the members of the Senate. Yet, after the expiration of 1991 of the agreement between the Republic of the Philippines and the United States of America concerning military bases, foreign military troops, facilities, they are not allowed in Philippines accepting a treaty duly concerned by the Senate. According to the National Defense Secretary Major Delphine also, the treaty should be reviewed comprehensively. It is also noted that we always argued, we always asked to what concern and to where is the US defense if they are really an ally during the South China attack. It wasn't answered at all. Since it's not with the contention that we have mentioned, it is necessary, it is beneficial, and it is for practical to abrogate the MDT. We, the affirmative side, rest our case that the Philippines-US Mutual Defense Treaty be abrogated. Finis versus Naneste, nen idiom principio non, there is non-real ending but a new beginning. Good day, everyone.
Thank you, the rebuttal speaker of the affirmative side. While our judges are still discussing as to the result of this debate contest, the moderator would like to turn you over back to our MCs.
Thank you, Dr. Himarangan. Again, we will have a 5-minute break while the judges are deliberating. Announcement. Please fill in the attendance form and the evaluation form sent by your respective student leaders. Again, please fill in the attendance form and the evaluation form sent by your respective student leaders. Thank you. Another announcement, awarding or recognition will be next week. So stay tuned, you guys. Again, please fill in the attendance form and the evaluation form sent here in the Google chat box, or you can also find it in your respective GC sent by your respective student leaders. Thank you.
get to express our contention. We get to show everyone that the affirmative side isn't always perfect in interpreting the law. We get to show you the variety of principle and perspective to all of this, complementing Manila's initiative to modernize the AFP. In relation to MDT's preamble stated, the preservation of peace and security pending the development of a more comprehensive system of regional security in the Pacific area.
I will ask again, can the Philippines successfully
Regional security in the Pacific area. Article 7 of the Mutual Defense also mentioned this treaty shall be ratified by the Republic of the Philippines and the United States of America in accordance with the respective
We would also
constitutional
like to
processes. Now it is very clear to
use
us
this
the Mutual Defense Treaty
opportunity to
abides with the National
acknowledge
Security Organization
and
in upholding.
congratulate
Thank you.
the
I'm
committee
satisfied.
behind
So,
this
in accordance,
your
it's stipulated
cooperation
here
and
that
your
both
work is
nations
very
respect
much
its constitutional
appreciated
processes.
and
So, contention. We get to show everyone that the affirmative side isn't always perfect in interpreting the law. Today we get to express our contention. We get to show everyone that the affirmative side isn't always perfect in interpreting the law. We get to show you the variety of principle and perspective to all of this. Before today's
judges will
proposition about
announce the
abrogating
winners, we would
MDT,
like to
I want to strip this
congratulate
down so
as
we can
well
fully
the
understand the true
debaters
essence of
for
this debate.
a job well
The
done.
MDT
You are
between the
you
Republic
all
of
are
the
so
Philippines
very
and the United States of
well
America,
spoken.
a treaty that was signed in 1950 to its modernization under the MDT jointly by and collective capacity to reach various efforts and compromise the AFP, particularly through
5 minutes has passed, but it seems that the judges are having a hard time deciding the winners. Kay mga may kaayo ang mga debaters nato. So let us give them another few minutes. Right, guys? So stay tuned.
a supplemental agreement of EDCA. Now, since EDCA is considered lawful by the Supreme Court, it abides by the principle of our Constitution. For that reason, abolishing EDCA to abrogate MDT serves unconstitutional by any means. Now, keep that in mind as I point my argument forward. To defend our sovereignty and integrity of our national territory, we will continue to develop an bilateral form stated why MDT is allowed under Article 2, Section 5 of our Constitution. We also explain abrogating MDT is impossible because of the active Today we get to express our contention toward each other if an external party attacks in the Philippines or the United States. History-wise, we reflect on the rich history of our alliance and the continue. Today we get to expose and The National Security Strategy, or the NSS, supports Article 2, Section 5 of our Constitution and Article 7 of the MDT. Third, MDT is constitutional. Allow me now, ladies and gentlemen, to expound the profoundness of my arguments. The Mutual Defense Treaty obligated the United States and the Philippines to maintain and develop their individual and collective defense capabilities, which constitute the creation of EDCA. Our contention. We get to show everyone that the affirmative side express our contention. We get to express our contention. Promoting development through international cooperations and economic diplomacy. Article 2, Section 5 of the Constitution also support the maintenance of peace and order to show everyone that the affirmative side isn't our contention. We get to show everyone that the affirmative side isn't always perfect in interpreting the law. We get to show you the variety of principle and perspective to all of this. Before today's proposition about abrogating MDT, I want to strip this down so we can fully understand the pure essence of this debate. The MDT between the Republic is always perfect in interpreting the law.
Again, announcement. Please fill in the evaluation form and the attendance form sent by your respective student leaders. You can also find the links sent here in the Google Meet group chat, Google Meet chat box. And the awarding or the recognition will be next week, so stay tuned for the exact date. Thank you.
Ay, okay, ako na nang i-end kay ma-pick up ka. Okay, good afternoon, Marie. I believe that the result is now ready.
All right. So we have
We'll just call in the chairperson of the board.
yes, sir.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. By the way, my name is Ricardo Jeric Apin III, and I am the chairperson of this board of judges. So I volunteered myself to be the chairperson to announce the winner because I would like to share something or some sort of message as an alumnus to this institution or to this program. So first of all, I would like to thank everyone, or especially the organizer of this event, for the privilege of inviting me as a judge. So especially this judges, this panel of judges that I'm with right now are very high profile, and medyo I'm sort of kanang mauwaw with the profile of these individuals in the board of judges. And also, I'm very honored because this this event as an this event is very meaningful to me, being a PolSci alumnus in your institution. So it brings back the memory and the excitement bitaw during our time. It's just that I'm more proud of this batch today because you are more intelligent, you are more active, and you are I can see that there is a good kind of maturity on your batch compared to our to ours during our time. But I am really proud and confident that soon when you graduate, you can give a lot of impact not just to our institution, to our alma mater, but also to our society. So keep learning, guys. So I agree that this debate event or debate contest is the highlight of this event, PolSci Fest. So mo sa June among ginapaabot pirmi sa una kada PolSci Fest. Alright. And aside from the fact no nga you can't be together physically because of the restrictions, but you manage it to become very enjoying as I'm seeing it. So another thing is that debate as being a PolSci student is really a highlight to us because it will give us the opportunity because diba, we are political animals according to Aristotle. So we always exercise our what we call power. We always use our power to advance what we like or what we intend. So mo na siya ang ato aron. So Miss Corsino was right earlier when she said that this we had a hard time deciding to identify the awardees of this event. Although even kami in the board of judges are debating ourselves. We are debating ourselves to identify which it should be this and that. So the moment of truth is this. I will announce the awardees. So the best debater of this event goes to why sound effect? Anyway, best debater goes to the first speaker of the negative side. So can we give a round of applause? Right, congratulations, first speaker of the negative side. For the best speaker, garnered most votes. Actually, this part is we are on the kanang money ang part nga among deliberate jud maayo because we have to settle which is the best speaker. So we've identified that the best speaker award goes to the third speaker of the negative side. All right. So congratulations. For the best rebuttalist, garnered the unanimous votes, goes to the affirmative side. Alright. Now, this part, I will be announcing the who's the best debating team. So the basis of the best debating team is the scores. Not actually who garners the most, as what we used to have, who garners the most awards goes the automatically na aniya ang kuan most award, but based on the scoring of the judges, we had, this is very a close kuan, a close match. So the best debating team goes to the affirmative side based on the scoring. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, and congratulations.
Thank you so much, Professor Apino. Congratulations once again, winners, and of course, the rest of the debaters. Your courage for joining this competition is very admirable and deserves such high praise and acknowledgement. At this juncture, we will have the awarding of certificates. Dr. Malti Marangan, will you do the honor, sir?
Thank you, Ms. Marie. We are very much grateful for the support and cooperation of our judges, for the expertise and valuable time they have shared with us this afternoon. The Political Science Society of University of Cebu is very much grateful and honored to have with you, to our professors. University of Cebu College of Arts and Sciences Political Science Program Certificate of Recognition is awarded to Professor Eric Salvador Gabuting for being a judge of the exhibition debate contest on the proposition resolved that Philippines-U.S. Mutual Defense Treaty be abrogated during Political Science Festival academic year 2021-2022, given this day of the Lord, 26th of April 2022. Signed, Honorable Venice Juna G. A. Garcia, President of UCPSS, the advisors of Political Science Society, Professor Renanti Ting and Professor Melfin C. Pinatil, and yours truly, and of course, our Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, Dr. Gloria C. Cuevas. Thank you very much, sir. The same certificate of recognition is given and awarded to Professor Ricardo Jeric Api Defre for being a judge of exhibition debate contest, with the proposition resolved that Philippines-U.S. Mutual Defense Treaty be abrogated. Also signed, Honorable Garcia, President of UCPSS, Professor Melfin Pinatil, and Professor Renanti Ting, our advisors of Political Science Society, yours truly, and Dr. Gloria C. Cuevas, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. Also, certificate of recognition is awarded to Professor Stefan Rose Tupes for being a judge of this exhibition debate contest. Signed, Ms. Garcia, President of UCPSS, Professors Melfin Pinatil and Renanti Ting, the advisors of Political Science Society, yours truly, and Dr. Gloria C. Cuevas, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. Also, certificate of recognition is awarded to Dr. Daryl Labides Falcon for being a judge of this afternoon's debate, with the proposition resolved that PH-US Mutual Defense Treaty be abrogated. Signed, Ms. Venice Garcia, President of UCPSS, Professor Melfin Pinatil, Advisor of UCPSS, also Professor Renanti Ting, Yours truly, and Dr. Gloria C. Cuevas, Dean of the College of Fire and Science. Thank you very much to our judges. Certificate of recognition is awarded to Miss Maureen Olvis for being one of the debaters of today's debate contest. Signed, Ms. Garcia, President of UCPSS, Professor Melvin Pinatil, Professor Nantiting, our advisors of Political Science Society, yours truly, and Dr. Gloria C. Cuevas, Dean, College of Arts and Sciences. Also, to Ms. Jessa Aviso, Ms. Maria May Dignos, Ms. Mary Carmel Sinuni, Mr. Prince Ramses Badana, Mr. Daniel Arcaya, Mr. Billy Ray Ligaspina, Mr. Joshua Mata Yongzon. Congratulations, dear students.
For the winners, anticipate your certificates on the awarding day. Again, thank you everyone for your support and attention for this afternoon's exhibition debate. We request everyone to please open your cameras for a photo opportunity. Thank you. Mr. Lamano, can you please screenshot? Thank you. On your mark.
Open the camera, guys.
Show your beautiful faces, everyone.
Okay, and 3, 2, 1.
Smile.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay.
All right. That ends our debate competition this afternoon. We appreciate you being here. We would like to thank everyone who made this activity possible. But before we leave, we would like to leave a message for everyone to ponder on. All competitions leave no failure, only a trail of courage, tenacity, and dedication that makes the pay worth the fight. No regrets, but only lessons learned. Thanks again for joining us today. This has been Marie Josephine Corsino and my partner, Lisa Marie Ibanez. See you next time, and God bless us all.
Zion high, with this azure blue sky, as you see our beloved, lofty in all her glory, sparks of wisdom, hope, and joy, always kindling in our hearts, the precious name, the glorious name.